Christmas at my parents' house was always a big deal. Every year, the entire family gathered for a full weekend of food, presents, and traditions that had been around since my childhood. This year felt even more special because it was my son's first real Christmas, at least the first one where he was old enough to be excited about everything. He was 3 years old, and at that perfect age where every light, every wrapped gift, and every cookie on the table was magical. I had been looking forward to this for weeks. But I should have known that my sister, Camille, would find a way to ruin it. Camille was 35 and had always been obsessed with making the holidays perfect, which, in her mind, meant everything looking like a curated Instagram post. She loved coordinated outfits, pristine decorations, and quiet, adult-only celebrations where everything followed a strict schedule. The problem? That had never been how our family did Christmas. We were loud, we were messy, and we were big on traditions. Growing up, Camille and I had been close, but things changed over the years. She made it clear that she thought my life choices, getting married, having a child, were beneath her. She had always been open about not wanting kids, which was fine, but she also had zero patience for them. And for some reason, she always acted like my son's existence was some sort of personal offense. I got my first warning before I even arrived. My Aunt Lisa pulled me aside when we got to my parents' house, lowering her voice as she leaned in. "Camille's already complaining about the baby running around," she whispered. I frowned. "He's 3. What does she expect him to do? Sit in a corner in silence?" Lisa sighed. "You know how she is." I did. And I decided I wasn't going to let it ruin my mood. I brushed it off and went inside. My son immediately ran to my mom, showing her the little stuffed reindeer he had brought with him. She beamed, scooping him up in a hug. That was the kind of Christmas I wanted. Warm, happy, and full of family. Camille barely greeted me when I saw her. She was too busy fussing over the table settings, making sure everything was symmetrical and elegant. I ignored the way she glanced at my son every time he laughed or clapped. I ignored the way she sighed when he toddled past her. I told myself I wouldn't let her attitude get under my skin. That lasted until dinner. We were all gathered around the table, passing dishes back and forth, when my son, overjoyed with his little plate of mashed potatoes, let out an excited giggle. It wasn't even loud, just a happy, toddler sound. Camille, who had been sipping her wine, rolled her eyes dramatically. "This would be so much more enjoyable if we didn't have a toddler screaming every 5 minutes," she muttered. The table went silent. My mom shifted uncomfortably. My dad, always the peacemaker, quickly asked someone about their job to change the subject. My husband squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder to let it go. I let it go. But later that night, when my son proudly ran up to my parents to show them his new toy truck, Camille scoffed. "God, he's literally ruining Christmas." That was it. That was the moment I snapped. "If anyone is ruining Christmas, Camille," I said calmly, "it's the person acting like a toddler over a toddler being happy." She turned red, then scoffed and walked out of the room. My dad, however, didn't hold back. "You threw a fit over a happy kid. You had that coming." Later, as I vented to my husband in our room, he joked, "Too bad we can't get Santa to call her out for being on the naughty list." That's when the idea hit me. What if I actually did? I knew someone, a professional Santa performer, through a friend. I pulled out my phone and sent him a quick message, asking if he was available for some special announcements on Christmas Day. He responded almost immediately. He loved the idea. So I sat down and started making a list. A very special list. Camille's Christmas crimes, over the years, were plenty. The year she threw a fit because the tree was too short. The time she cried because my mom didn't make the exact dessert she wanted. The time she demanded my parents stop playing Christmas music because it was too cliché. And of course this year, where she had decided a 3-year-old was ruining Christmas just by existing. I was going to make sure she got the recognition she deserved. And tomorrow, Santa was going to deliver it. Christmas morning started off exactly as I had planned. The living room was full of wrapping paper, the smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air, and my son was running around showing everyone his new toy truck. My parents were busy setting up brunch, my husband was helping my dad with coffee, and most of the family was lounging around in pajamas, was still waking up from the late night before. Then the doorbell rang. My hired Santa arrived in full costume, complete with a red suit, white beard, and a giant sack of presents slung over his shoulder. The kids went wild, jumping up and down as he stepped inside with a deep, jolly laugh. Even the adults looked amused, except for Camille, who barely glanced up from her spot on the couch, swiping through her phone with one hand and sipping coffee with the other. The hired Santa went straight into character, handing out candy canes and chatting with the kids, his exaggerated ho ho ho, making my son beam with excitement. My son, practically vibrating with excitement, ran up to hug him. My mom beamed as she took pictures, while my dad chuckled, shaking his head at the whole spectacle. Then after a few minutes of lighthearted fun, Santa clapped his hands together and announced, "And now, for a very special list, the top 5 Christmas fails of a certain someone who made it to the naughty list this year." There was a ripple of laughter around the room. Camille didn't even look up, assuming it was some joke about the kids. Santa pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and began. Coming in at number 5, the time she tried to convince her younger cousin that Santa doesn't exist when she was 12. That cousin still holds a grudge, by the way. My cousin, who was the victim of that particular incident, burst out laughing, pointing at Camille. I knew I'd get my revenge someday. Camille furrowed her brows. "Okay, weird choice," Santa continued. At number 4, the year she threw a fit because the Christmas tree theme was tacky, so she redecorated it at 2 in the morning, waking up the entire household. My mom choked on her tea, trying to hold in her laughter. Camille slowly sat up, eyes narrowing. "Are you serious?" Santa barely paused. Number 3, the Christmas dinner of 2016, where she sent back her own mother's homemade stuffing because it wasn't restaurant quality. My dad snorted so hard he had to leave the room. My mom shook her head with a smile. Camille waved a hand in frustration. "Okay, this is just stupid now." By this point, even my usually reserved uncle was wheezing. My aunt wiped tears from her eyes. Number 2, Santa bellowed. The time she made the family take 3 rounds of Christmas photos because she wasn't happy with her angle, and then forgot to send the cards anyway. My brother cracked up. Oh my god, I forgot about that. Camille turned to me, her face completely red now. You set this up, didn't you? Santa wasn't done. And finally, the #1 Christmas fail of all time, this year, when she declared her own nephew was ruining Christmas because he was happy. The room fell silent for half a second. Then my grandma clapped and said, well, she earned that one. Laughter exploded around the room. My cousin high-fived Santa. My mom shook her head, biting her lip to stop a smile. My husband leaned back, barely holding in his laughter. Camille gasped audibly. She glanced around, realizing nobody was rushing to defend her. Then without another word, she stood up so fast her coffee cup nearly tipped over. This family is impossible. She stormed upstairs, slamming the door. Nobody followed. Santa dusted off his hands, took a bow, and said, and with that, I take my leave. The entire family erupted into laughter again. The moment Camille slammed her door, the living room settled into a strange silence. My dad let out a long sigh, rubbing his temples. My mom, standing near the Christmas tree, glanced toward the staircase before shaking her head. She tried to smooth things over, her voice calm as she said, maybe we shouldn't have embarrassed her like that. But the way she bit her lip to stop herself from laughing told a different story. Across the room, my cousin leaned in and whispered, okay, but that was the best thing I've ever seen at a Christmas gathering. A few chuckles went around, but for the most part, people started moving on. My mom, ever the peacemaker, took a deep breath and walked up the stairs, knocking softly on Camille's door. Come back down and enjoy the rest of Christmas, she called. No response. A moment later, my mom sighed and walked back down. She's not in the mood. Nobody was surprised. Meanwhile, the family's group chat had exploded. Relatives who weren't even at the gathering were messaging, asking for details. Someone had already posted a summary, and within minutes, laughing emojis flooded the chat. Why didn't anyone record it? Santa did what? Camille deserved that one. This is the kind of Christmas drama I live for. It was chaos. Some family members, particularly the ones who had clashed with Camille before, were openly entertained. Others sent cautious messages about how maybe things went too far. But overall, it was clear that the majority of the family thought it was hilarious. About an hour after Camille had locked herself away, my phone buzzed with a message from her. Nice to know you enjoy humiliating your own sister. You ruined Christmas more than your precious child ever could. I stared at the screen for a second before typing back. You did that to yourself, Camille. Maybe next year, don't be so mean to a 3-year-old. No response. That didn't mean she was done. At first, Camille scoffed and dismissed the whole thing as stupid, rolling her eyes whenever someone mentioned it. But as the day went on and more family members laughed about Santa's list, her irritation started bubbling over. By that evening, she was on the phone with my Aunt Lisa, clearly hoping for some sympathy. Lisa, however, wasn't having it. She had been there for the whole thing, and from what I could overhear of the conversation, she wasn't about to coddle Camille. You're taking this way too seriously, she told her flatly. It was a joke. Let it go. Camille hung up on her. Hours passed. People played board games, snacked on leftover cinnamon rolls, and the usual Christmas chaos continued. My son, completely oblivious to the drama, sat in a pile of wrapping paper playing with his new toys. Camille, however, stayed upstairs, silent. It wasn't until dessert was served that she finally emerged. She walked into the dining room, sat at the farthest end of the table, and didn't make eye contact with anyone. She avoided my gaze completely, acting like I wasn't there. More noticeably, she barely acknowledged my son. If he giggled too loudly, her lips pressed into a thin line, and when he tried to show her his new toy, she simply muttered, "That's nice," without even looking. My husband caught it immediately. He didn't say anything, but I could see the way his expression tightened as he watched her deliberately ignore our child. Some of our relatives tried to engage her in small talk, but she barely responded. Her answers were short, clipped, and she mostly poked at her dessert without eating it. The tension at the table was thick, but nobody addressed it directly. Then as we were cleaning up, Camille stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked straight to my mom. "I'm not coming next year," she declared. Everyone turned to look. My mom, still stacking plates, barely glanced up. "That's your choice," she replied casually. Camille clearly hadn't expected that reaction. She stood frozen for a moment, as if waiting for my mom to backtrack and beg her to reconsider. When that didn't happen, she scoffed, muttered something under her breath, and walked out the door without another word. As soon as it closed behind her, my brother let out a low whistle. Well, he said, maybe Santa should do that every year. Laughter rippled around the room again, but at the same time, there was an underlying shift in the air. Over the next few days, it became clear that this wasn't just a one-time tantrum. Family members started taking sides. Some agreed that Camille had overreacted, while a smaller group, mostly those who weren't there, argued that the joke had been too much. But as more people started sharing their own past experiences with Camille's behavior during the holidays, a pattern emerged. This wasn't about Santa's list. It was about years of Camille acting like Christmas was hers to control. And suddenly, people weren't so willing to play along anymore. The morning after Christmas, Camille wasted no time launching into a full-blown rant in a separate group chat with just our immediate family. Her messages came in rapid bursts, paragraphs of frustration pouring into the chat. She called me cruel for humiliating her in front of the whole family and insisted that I had set her up to be the villain. She went on about how she had been ambushed and how I had clearly planned this in advance to make her look bad. According to her, the entire thing was a calculated move, a public embarrassment campaign disguised as a joke. She made it sound like she had been an innocent bystander, unfairly attacked on Christmas Day. My mom, still trying to smooth things over, responded first. "I think maybe it went too far, but Camille, you did say that about a 3-year-old. Camille ignored that part completely. My dad, however, didn't hold back. "You threw a fit over a happy kid. You had that coming." She left him on read. Meanwhile, the rest of the family hadn't moved on quite like Camille wanted them to. The group chat with my extended relatives was still buzzing with jokes about Santa's list. My cousins were sending messages like, "That was legendary," and "Can this be an annual tradition?" Someone even joked that next year, we should get Santa to a full PowerPoint presentation. Camille, of course, was fuming. And when she realized she wasn't getting enough sympathy in the family group chat, she decided to take things public. Scrolling through Facebook later that night, I spotted Camille's latest post. It was the usual vague, passive-aggressive complaint, nothing worse than when family treats you like a joke. Lesson learned. I rolled my eyes, but before I could scroll past, my cousin messaged me, "Wow, she's really playing the victim, huh?" She had posted a vague but dramatic status, "Nothing worse than when family treats you like a joke. Lesson learned." The comments started rolling in. At first, there were the usual vague sympathizers. "Family can be cruel. You didn't deserve that. Ugh, people have no respect these days." But then, people who actually knew what had happened started chiming in. "Wait, weren't you the one complaining about a happy kid?" You kind of set yourself up for that one, Camille. "Oh please, we all know your Christmas meltdowns are a yearly tradition at this point." At first, Camille tried arguing back. "This isn't about a kid, it's about respect," she replied under one of the comments. But the more people pushed back, the clearer it became that she wasn't going to get the reaction she wanted. After a few more weak attempts at defending herself, she quietly deleted the post. She wasn't done though. A little while later, I got a direct message from one of her friends, Jessica. "That was really mean. Camille is devastated." I stared at the message for a second before typing back. So she can dish it out but can't take it?" Jessica left me on read. A few hours later, Camille texted me. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was as close as she was willing to get. "I guess I shouldn't have said what I did, but you went too far." I read the message twice before replying. "You don't have to like kids, but maybe next time don't ruin Christmas for them." She read the message but never responded. And then, just like that, she started ignoring me completely. No texts, no activity in the family group chat, no passive-aggressive comments, just total silence. It was almost eerie. Over the next few days, the divide in the family became more obvious. Some people were still laughing about the Santa incident, while others, mainly the ones who hadn't been there, thought Camille was being bullied. My mom, stuck in the middle, just wanted everyone to get along. When she sent out an invite for a small New Year's Eve gathering, Camille's response was immediate, "Not interested." At that point, it was clear, this wasn't just about Christmas anymore. Camille was making this into a full-fledged family standoff, and from the looks of it, things were only just getting started. A week after the Christmas chaos, Camille did something completely out of character. She invited my husband, my son, and me to dinner at her house. Camille never hosted anything. If there was an event, it was always at my parents' house, or she just showed up somewhere last minute, making a scene about how she was so busy. So the fact that she was suddenly playing hostess felt suspicious. Matt had been quiet ever since the game incident, never outright defending or condemning our parents. But after seeing how far they were willing to go, he started questioning things more. One night, after another argument with them, he made a decision. Without saying anything to my parents, he packed his things and moved out. "Are we walking into an ambush?" he asked as we stood in the kitchen reading her message. I had the same feeling. Camille was not the type to let things go, and this sudden act of warmth felt fake. But against better judgment, I agreed to go. If she was trying to play some game, I wanted to see what she was up to. The moment we arrived at her house, my suspicions were confirmed. Camille greeted us at the door with a huge forced smile and an exaggeratedly sweet tone. "Oh, I'm just so happy to have family here. Fresh start, right?" Mark gave me a side glance. I forced a polite smile and stepped inside. Dinner started off normal enough, but it didn't take long for Camille to start slipping in little comments, ones she could easily play off as innocent if called out. At one point, she looked me up and down and said with a fake smile, "I'm so impressed you actually dressed up this time." I raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. Then came the backhanded parenting advice. I read this study about how children who are too coddled become entitled adults. Just something interesting I read. She smiled as she sipped her wine, waiting for a reaction. I didn't give her one. But Camille wasn't done. She served dinner, and I immediately noticed something. She had made a dish she knew my son didn't like, one he had refused to eat ever since he was a toddler. It wasn't just an oversight, either. Camille had been there during previous family gatherings when he wouldn't touch it. As soon as she placed his plate in front of him, she gasped dramatically. "Oh no. Oh, I thought he was finally growing out of that picky phase. I guess not." I calmly said, "You know he doesn't like that, Camille. Why make a big deal about it?" She rolled her eyes and muttered something about how kids need to learn to eat what's served. The tension in the room became obvious. Mark had gone stiff beside me, his jaw tightening. I could feel the shift in the air, but Camille wasn't done pushing. She leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine, and smirked. "Well, maybe if you weren't such a helicopter parent, he wouldn't be so sensitive." Mark set his fork down. Without missing a beat, he looked at me and said, "We're leaving." Camille's smirk disappeared. She looked completely thrown off, as if she hadn't expected Mark to shut things down so quickly. As I gathered our things, she let out a bitter laugh and sneered. "Well, at least I didn't humiliate anyone in front of the whole family." I turned to face her. "You humiliated yourself, Camille. All I did was hire a Santa to read the truth." She opened her mouth like she was about to snap back, but before she could, I turned and walked out with my family. My son, thankfully, was completely oblivious to the tension. He was happily holding onto his toy truck, chattering about how he wanted to go home and watch his favorite movie. We drove home in silence for a few minutes before Mark shook his head and muttered, "Never again." That night, Camille went straight to social media. She made another dramatic post, this time calling me toxic and accusing me of turning the family against her. But this time, people weren't so quick to take her side. Camille's meltdown after the dinner disaster didn't just fade away, it caused a ripple effect across the family. Some relatives messaged me privately, rolling their eyes at her behavior and saying she was being ridiculous. Others, however, took a different approach, telling me I should just apologize to keep the peace. It was the same old story. Camille stirred up drama, and somehow I was expected to fix it. But the real surprise came from our grandmother. She usually stayed out of family arguments, but this time she made her opinion known. If Camille can't take a joke, that's her problem, she said bluntly. But if she can't apologize for being mean to a baby, that's a bigger problem. My mom, caught between trying to keep the family together and her exhaustion from Camille's antics, decided to stage some kind of family sit-down. She invited Camille, me, and a few other family members for what was supposed to be a discussion to smooth things over. I wasn't excited about it, but I agreed to go. If nothing else, I wanted to see how Camille would handle being confronted by more than just me. Camille arrived acting like she had been the victim of a major crime. She walked in with an air of wounded dignity, barely glancing in my direction, her lips pressed into a tight frown. My mom, ever the peacemaker, started the conversation carefully. We just want to get past this and move forward as a family. Camille sighed dramatically, dabbing at her eyes like she was about to burst into tears. I just can't believe my own family would turn on me over a joke. I let out a short laugh before I could stop myself. A joke? You literally called my son annoying and said he was ruining Christmas. Camille's eyes flashed. You're the one who went out of your way to make me look bad. Before I could even respond, my brother, who had been sitting quietly up until now, leaned forward and said flatly, Camille, you made yourself look bad. She turned to glare at him, but before she could say anything, my dad spoke up. You are almost 36. If you cannot handle facing consequences for your words, that is on you. The room went silent. Camille's face turned red. She shot up from her seat, grabbed her purse, and stormed toward the door. This family has always been against me. She shrieked on her way out. The door slammed behind her. A heavy silence filled the room. Then my mom let out a long sigh and muttered, I am so tired. My dad shook his head. Then stop enabling her. That should have been the end of it. But Camille wasn't done. Instead of making another dramatic Facebook post, she switched tactics. She started privately messaging certain family members, trying to sway them to her side. My cousin later sent me a screenshot of Camille's latest message. It's clear I'm not welcome in my own family anymore. She was playing the victim, carefully choosing who to message so she wouldn't get pushback. Anyone who challenged her narrative got ignored or ghosted. At this point, the family was officially divided. Some defended Camille, saying she was just sensitive. Others weren't buying it. But something told me Camille wasn't finished yet. After disappearing for a few days, Camille finally resurfaced with a mass text to the family. It was long, dramatic, and dripping with self-pity. Since it's clear I'm the villain in this family, I'll just remove myself entirely. Hope you all enjoy your perfect little world without me. Nobody responded immediately. My mom, still clinging to the hope of reconciliation, sighed and later asked me, can you just try reaching out? She's obviously upset. I shook my head. Mom, she's upset because she refuses to take accountability. That's not my problem. Over the next few days, Camille started reaching out to extended family members, spinning the story in a way that painted me as the toxic one. Some relatives messaged me, clearly trying to guilt-trip me into making amends. She's your sister. You should fix this. Family is more important than a silly argument. One of my aunts even went as far as saying, it's Christmas. Do you really want to end the year like this? But others weren't buying it. My grandmother shut it down immediately, telling one of my aunts, if Camille can't handle the consequences of her words, that's on her, not on anyone else. My brother also refused to entertain Camille's sob story. He told me, she's been pulling this same stunt since we were kids. You don't owe her anything. I thought things would settle down after that. Camille was sulking in her self-imposed exile, and I assumed she'd let it go eventually. I was wrong. A few days later, I got a message from one of my friends. Hey, just a heads up, Camille messaged me. And a few others, actually. She's been telling people you orchestrated a public humiliation, and that you're a manipulative bully. Attached were screenshots. Camille had gone out of her way to contact people in my personal life, trying to ruin my reputation outside of the family. She was ranting about how I had set her up, how I was obsessed with making her look bad, and how I had turned the entire family against her with my lies. My friend's message ended with, this is really unhinged. That was the final straw. I sent Camille a message, you are reaching out to my friends now? You need to stop. If you want to be mad, fine, but dragging my name through the mud because you can't handle a Christmas joke is pathetic. Her response was immediate. What are you talking about? I didn't say anything like that. I sent her the screenshots. She pivoted instantly. Wow. So you're spying on me now? This is exactly why I can't trust anyone in this family. I wasn't playing that game. You're the one who started this. You humiliated yourself, and now you're trying to drag me down with you. That's when she completely lost it. You're the one who started this. You humiliated me, and now you're playing the victim? You ruined my Christmas and my reputation. I gave her one final response. You ruined your own Christmas by being cruel to a child. And as for your reputation, you're the one who keeps making it worse. She didn't respond after that, and that's when I realized there was nothing left to salvage. Camille wasn't sorry. She wasn't learning anything from this. So I made the decision to cut ties completely. From that moment on, I was done. I didn't reach out. I didn't try to fix things. I didn't engage with her drama anymore. If she wanted to isolate herself from the family, that was her choice. Camille, feeling cornered, started pulling away from certain family members while doubling down with others. She continued talking to the few relatives who sympathized with her, feeding them a new narrative about how she was being ostracized. Meanwhile, those who didn't support her got the cold shoulder. At one point, my Aunt Lisa mentioned that some relatives were tired of the drama and had started distancing themselves from both of us, not wanting to take sides. I told her they could do whatever they wanted. I wasn't wasting energy on this anymore. The real shock came when my mom, after years of making excuses for Camille, finally admitted, Maybe I'd been babying Camille too much. It was the first time I had ever heard her acknowledge it. Despite all the chaos, my son had the best Christmas ever. He was too young to understand the drama, and to him it was just a magical holiday filled with gifts, family, and a special visit from Santa. That was all that mattered. Months later, Camille was still sulking in her self-imposed exile. But for me, the lesson was clear. I wasn't going to waste time on someone who refused to take accountability. And next Christmas, we were hiring Santa again, just for tradition's sake.